So today we're going to talk about the situation in contemporary Vietnam. And with my guest, I'd like to begin, Dot, by asking you to briefly introduce yourself and share some of your research interests.
Okay, so my name is Dad. I'm 35 years old. I was born in Ho Chi Minh City and grew up here. I'm an engineer by training, and right now I'm working in electronic manufacturing companies. So I'm not how to say formally trained in any kind of political trainings. I'm also not a party member, just to be clear. My interest is actually just like regular people. I tries to understand how the policy of the parties, what they want to achieve, and how it links to the real condition in Vietnam to answer the big question: Are we still socialist, and how are we going there? That was my question from when I was young. But then I was not able to fully understand all the party documentation, which is very generic, and you also need some kind of understanding of Marxism philosophy in order to understand them. So most of my research will focus on understanding how contemporary Vietnam will want to reach socialism, what kind of contradictions are happening today, where we are, the difficulty of that, and what have been changed over the time. So that's basically also in the list of questions that you will ask, and that is the topic that I can share more with everybody today. Yeah.
Wonderful. Now, we're mainly going to discuss contemporary Vietnam. However, to set the stage for our conversation, could you briefly explain how Vietnam emerged as an independent country after decades of anti-imperialist struggle? How have the years of war, as well as the eventual successful routing of the US military, impacted contemporary Vietnam?
I think this is a good question because for me, every time we want to discuss anything, we need to talk about the history and the realities, the materialism realities of the countries. Vietnam was a colony of French, if you know. Uh, and then in 1930, after the forming of the Communist Party, uh, we have um, we have many struggles against the French, but was not successful until 1945 after the Second World War. So at that time, Ho Chi Minh was able to lead the Viet Minh at that time. So it's actually was not only the Communist Party, but also more like a front with unite all the fractions, even the people that love the patriotics, who are even belongs to the old imperial dynasty. But as long as they are patriotic, it was together and we formed the first country, which is the Democratic Republic of Vietnam, which take care of the whole country from north to south. However, I think in within only 1 year, the French coming back, and then there is a 9 years resistance against the French. So it's mostly happened in the north, and in the south, the French also established more like a puppet governments for them in the south. And so we was not able to do any kind of socialist reform, for example, land reform, nothing happening until 1954 when we get a victory at the Bin Phu, and uh, and then after that, the country, because of the Geneva Accord, the country was split into two. Basically, it was not supposed to be this way. It's just a um, temporary areas for the troop to move to. But then, the US are the one who pay all the cost for the French war. Now he become the master, and then jumping in and tries to split Vietnam permanently. So the one interesting thing is Ho Chi Minh, even after the Dien Phu, right, in 1954, he already says that we need to prepare to fight the US now. And the reason that he know is because he very skilled politicians. So he know that whoever pay the cost will be the master, and then they will never allow a uniform country, a unified country with a communist party at the head, and then also connect to China and the USSR at the time as our bloc. But at that time, we was not strong enough to stand by ourselves in the in the international political discussion in the Geneva Accord. So at the end, we had to compromise and accept the deals, and then it took us another 20 more years until 1955 when we can really unite our countries. So in 1975, the whole Vietnam was, I would say, badly destroyed because everything that we built in the north that we call socialist constructions was destroyed by the US. In the south, there was not really any kind of real manufacturing happenings because everything is to support more or less service support the US took. And it was all gone after the US withdrawals. So Vietnam was really poor. There's no infrastructures. There is no allies because China already on the other side, and the USSR is within their own reforming, the perestroika and everything. So and then we have the whole war in Cambodia with triggers by the Pol Pot in 1979. But then even though we toppled the government in just 2 weeks, but then we spent 10 years over there to stabilize the country because basically Pol Pot has support by the US, the UK, even the Asian country like Thailand and Singapore. So it took us roughly 10 years to find some kind of political solution. And then only after that, we can normalize relationship with China in 1989. And then only after that, it will go to the US normalization in 1994. So basically, the whole productive force in Vietnam was really poor, especially at the end of the 1980s. We really has nothing, and we don't have any kind of consumer good. We cannot produce anything. And even the things that we produce very well, for example, farming rice, we also cannot produce sufficiently for our own peoples, and we need to get support from the Eastern Europe. I think they have some kind of how to say, food for the cashews, and then they give it to us, something we never eat, but then we need to eat anyway just to survive. And it's very common for Vietnamese to mix rice with something else to eat at that time. So that's basically what we are at the start of the đổi mới reform. That's what they call it. They use the Vietnamese word because they don't want to, just change to a reform, and then people will think immediately like political reform and stuff like that. So it happened in 1986. It was officially kicked off by the after the I think the sixth convention of the Communist Party. So it's officially kicked off, and then it's still happening today. So officially, Vietnam are in the transitions to the first day of socialism. So we are not there. We are trying to skip the whole capitalism phase, which is very difficult. So there is full of contradictions, which I will explain more. Yeah.
Yeah,
So that's the whole background.
yeah, it's important background, and I'm very curious to hear more if you want to add anything more about the defeat of Pol Pot and how important that is to the history of the global socialist movement. Because unfortunately, in the West, many people think that Pol Pot was a representative of communism, and that all of the murders that occurred on his watch are somehow ones that should be then attributed to the history of the global socialist movement. But just in relationship to Vietnam, there are so many on the left, and I'm thinking particularly of the Western left, who claim that Vietnam either gave up its socialist project a long time ago or never really had one. And what do you make of this general claim? Is Vietnam simply capitalist, or is there an ongoing socialist project? And then, if so, how can we understand it?
Okay, these are very common claims for people who don't have a really chance to understand what we have been going through. So if we want to understand the socialist project, we need to understand how do we reach there, right? So if we read about Marx writing, it's always about, he always predict that it will happen in the very advanced capitalist country. And the main reason is because based on that, the productive force has to be the one to be developed first. So it has to reach a very high advanced level. And then over there, you will have the relationship of productions, which basically is it a private ownership or is it a common ownership? And then it will come into contradictions with the high level of the productive force. And then some struggle will happen, and then the mode of production will change. That's why he think only a place where productive force has very highly advanced, you have excess of everything, and we are able to produce everything we need with a very less amount of resources, then that will be the place that socialism will emerge. In the yoke of capitalism itself. That's the basic rules of Marxism philosophy. But the problem is in the Eastern world, not only Vietnam, I think it's also fair in China or in Laos, is we have a country who are destroyed and didn't have basically any kind of productive force. It's a kind of semi-colonial countries, has been destroyed, have been bombed, and now we are trying to put on top a very high and advanced relation of productions. In this case, only government owned and corporations, and we ignore all the realities that there is some private ownership that has been there from the beginning, and we want to destroy it. We want to eliminate it right away. And that's what we think what is socialism is. So the problem here is when we try to do that, our productive force is too low and it's create different contradictions. For examples, in the area of agriculture, Vietnam at that time it will be like everybody join the co-ops and you work, and then every harvest will come to the government, and then the government will really have calculate down to each person depending on your sex, your age, how much rice and food that you should get. But because the harvest is very low, so even though it's calculate properly according to the need, everybody get much less than what they need. So people are poor. The kid cannot have enough nutrition for their developments. But then the reason that we don't have a good harvest is also because people don't have any incentive to work very hard, because everything focus on quantity and not qualities. So if you do very good to ensure that the rice will develop well, you do it a bit slower than the others, and actually you are pushing for that. So that sounds very contradicting, because even though on paper is corporation is everybody are taking care of, but underneath we are not even able to produce sufficiently for ourselves, and there is no incentive to do it properly. And ours tractors are still done by buffaloes at that time, and we don't have anybody who are willing to sell tractor or seed. We don't have the technologies to preserve the rice, and together with all of that, then actually the harvest just keep going down after we do cooperation, and people don't understand why the more they ask people to do and really push this, if they don't do properly, the less we get. So that is one thing that I think is a problem in not only Vietnam, but the old models of the subsidized economy, in even also in the USSR and in the Eastern Europe, is focused too much on quantity. Everything is calculated on how many tons of steel, how many tons of price that you get, and not into the qualities, because we equals that something that are higher qualities is some kind of luxury style, which is not part of socialism. So at the end, we have the relationship of socialism, and everybody is poor. Vietnam was like nearest poorest in the world, and we are asking ourselves, it is something that we want to achieve for the people, because at the end, it's the people that we talking about. And also we are being dogmatic. We didn't respect the realities that we didn't have developed productive force. But we want to skip the step of capitalism, and we skip the whole development of the productive force, and we just impose the relationship, the new relationship of cooperation on top, and destroy all the rest. So that's very dogmatic, that's idealistic. And at the end, the results show that the reality show that it's a failure. So if we are Marxists, right, we have to accept the realities and understand, okay, how should we change in order to make it better. So that's exactly that what they do in đổi mới. So it's a change in mindset, and it's going back to the root of Marxism, trying to apply Marxism to our condition and not just copy the models from like USSR with a vastly different country resources and different historical context as well. Even if we want to copy China, it was not the same. So that's the whole point of đổi mới. So đổi mới focus more about mindset change, economic reforms, and something, and how to deal with the contradiction coming out of that. There was not much political reform. So that's what I want to highlight. So this is very different from what happened in the USSR, where the political reform was always forefront, change the party, multiple parties, making the president remove the power for the party, and so on. So it was never done for Vietnam, basically. Yeah.
So the focus of the Doi Moi, or the reform process, was much more on uh, developing the productive forces qualitatively
Yes,
through
yes,
both economic means, but then also a kind of change in consciousness and an overcoming of certain dogmatic approaches to the development of the
correct.
productive forces. Can you unpack for us a little more, thinking here of an audience that might not be very familiar at all with the reform process in
Mm-hmm.
Vietnam? What are some of the ways in which this reform process was undertaken? And more specifically, what's the relationship kind of between global capitalism or capitalist forces and then the development of the productive forces within Vietnam, and what the Vietnamese refer to as a kind of socialist oriented market economy?
Mm-hmm. Um, the first thing that they do is, they if they say they respect the realities, then there is a lot of private companies that owned by peoples, and then they want to allow it to happen. The first of all, they allows the market to happen, because in the past it's forbidden to even uh, buy and sell. So it's forbidden. There is no market at all. People still do it in black market, but officially it was forbidden. So the first thing they do is allow it to happen. And in terms of agriculture, they have policies to say that if you own this land, not really own, but if you own the rights to produce in this land, then everything you get from there is yours. You can sell it to others to get the monies to buy something else, or you keep the rights if you want. And then they do that for everybody in Vietnam. And within 2 years, Vietnam, from a country that need to import food, we become a country that exports rice within 2 years. And even at that time, I think the USSR was still there, and in a meeting between Gorbachev and I think our leader at the time, he was really embarrassed because we are able to change the situation so quickly, and then now we become an exporter of food, which validate that at least our policy in the agriculture field is correct. So we can say that, okay, meaning that this is basically the farmer is more like a petty bourgeois who are owning something small and own everything that they do. But at least they didn't, exploit anybody. They just exploit their own, and then they get all the food, and then afterward we try to form them into corporation, but in a different ways. It's more volunteer, and then the governments will provide technologies, seed, tractor, machine, so that they will become more efficient in running their farms in a much larger areas. And then because it still belongs to them, so now they have the incentive to work together, because all of them will get more. And then the job of the government is, first of all, we use it for our own populations. After a while, we are able to export a lot of rice, millions tons per year. Then we change our strategies to move higher up the value chains in agriculture, meaning we will plant the high values kind of seed, and then just a lot, and then we will export at higher values to other countries, meaning the government will need to plan out exactly how much we need, what kind of price that we want, which one for export, which one for our own consumption. And now we focus on quality more than quantity. But we only can do this after we go through a phase that we are able to grow as much rice as we want and sufficiently to sacrifice all the people need. So that's one example from the agriculture fields. I think back to the question is about, can you repeat the question again, just to make sure?
Well, it's just about the specificity of the reform process and what exactly occurred. So there's an opening up to markets,
Okay.
right? And the things that you explained. Are there other aspects related to like industrialization or to capitalist investment and things like this?
Yes, they call it multiple fraction market, meaning there is common ownership, there is government ownership, there is private ownership, also foreign ownership in terms of FDIs. So they are all present and are all treated equally in front of the law, which means that they open the markets for foreign direct investment like FDI company to come in to invest, and the main purpose is for them to bring in the technologies, the know-how, administrations, training, so that our people will be able to catch up. Because even at that time, if you give us a very highly advanced technologies, we may not be able to absorb it because of the limited knowledge. So that's what they allows it to do. So a lot of foreign companies, especially from the US, like Nike, was actually among the first one who come in because it's a no-brainer. They have very high margins because the labor cost is low, and then we also have a very big market. 100 million of people are able to consume that. So in the sphere of manufacturing, that's what's happening first. We allow more and more companies to come in, so they can. I think what we want is mainly the capitals and the technologies and the know-how. That's the three things that we want. We understand that it also means that we allow for a company to exploit our labors. So there is some mechanism in place to ensure that all the welfare and everything that's set by the rules, they have to fulfill it. There's no question about that. So normally there will be some rules like on top of the salary, they have to pay roughly 20% to the insurance, social insurance funds for every workers. They need to pay around 2 or 3% for medical insurance, and that's a must for everybody. So if they don't do that, they will be shut down, even for one. So that is how you get back some of the surplus value back in for the peoples, and we allows them to extract some profit for sure. Then over the time, similarly to the agriculture field, we want to move up the value chain, which means we don't actually want lower values and high labor intensive kind of industry anymore. So we will make rules to ensure that we only accept high technologies kind of investment that belongs to a certain area where the party has set out that is the strategic area that we want to invest in the futures. So one example will be we used to produce a lot of clothes and shoes and so on. We use a lot of labors, but nowadays a lot moved to Bangladesh and India, and Vietnam actually didn't have major new projects in this area anymore. We want high technologies. And because I work for the high technology companies as well, also an FDI company, so I know very well, there is rules such as you are not allowed to import a machine that are more than 10 years old. So you cannot just dump all technologies and low efficiency machine into Vietnam anymore. And it was very strict. So basically, at the end, we buy news. So we have become brand new compared to other areas, and then people like me or other will be able to learn about the new technology and handle it, and then they can even go out and open their own shop afterward if they have sufficient knowledge. So I think this is also what happening in China. Um, yeah, and with so now officially we want to focus on chip making because we already have the kind of solid electronic manufacturing sectors. I think I'm not able to show here, but it will be interesting if you analyze what become export at the three different time frame. So around 1990 to around 2000, our main export will be agriculture products and oil. It's not even a processed oil; it's just a raw oil and gas. Then from 2000 to roughly 2010, it moved into garments and higher level of agriculture products like coffee or processing, basically processed agriculture product, which has a much higher values compared to the raw extractions. And then now it's dominated by electronic export, and oil and gas become nearly zeros. We only use it for our own need, and even the agriculture sectors become much less in percentage compared to the rest. So that's happening within 30 years. And that's what we mean by developing a productive force. It's including both, of course, the technology and machine, but also the peoples. And I think the people are more important. If you don't have proper trained technicians, they will not be able to operate any machine, and then that machine will go to waste, which we have seen in many places. So we need to really be patient and allow for things to be trained and developed and slowly grow up the train. It cannot happen within a date. Like, they always say pressing the button and then suddenly you have an advanced productive force, but it was not that way. And the capitalist world are also very smart. Of course, they don't want to give you a technology for you to develop. They just want to extract. So it happened in the car industry. We allow the Japanese company to come in and give them a lot of tax breaks and everything. And what we want is some kind of internalization of some parts so they can produce it more in Vietnam. So we can increase, let's say, from 10% of a car made in Vietnam become like 50 or 60. But in 40 years, they never do that. They only use their own supplier from Japan because that's not in their interest to develop the industry in Vietnam. So Vietnam changed the strategies. They suddenly the whole government focused on green and electric car. And for electric car, you don't need an engine, right? Which is the most complex part that's very hard to produce. And suddenly overnight, we can spawn the companies with this VinFast, which is one of the biggest car producers in Vietnam, which are only produce electric car because they are asked to do so. And then the whole country changed the strategy and say, now we only want green, we only want electric because we want to commit to COP29. And suddenly the whole industry of the internal combustion engine become obsolete. So now it doesn't matter whether you give us or not. And then within just a few months, then the top seller car is now already a electric car, and that doesn't happen overnight because they don't, of course, they don't receive any lobbies from the oil and gas industry. There's no things like that in Vietnam. And I think this is also an important point. The parties has their own set of directions and what they want to do in the long term, and it's written in the documentation. The capitalists, especially the one from the overseas foreign direct government, cannot just lobby, pay money, and get it changed overnight. That's how things is done. So now we are able to take care of the whole supply chains of car industry, and we have a big market. So we sell internally, and now they even export cars to Indonesia and the Philippines. So that is how we learn. I also explained one of the contradictions that we want it one thing, whether they do it is another thing. Yeah.
That's fascinating because it's also a really good example then of both technology transfer, but the increase in know-how and how that then allows the country to move up the value chain. I want to discuss some of this in some greater detail in a moment, but I want to cycle back to this issue that we talked about just a second ago, and that is the question of transition to socialism. I was very
Mm-hmm,
struck by a text by Professor and Doctor, and sorry, I'm going to mispronounce the name, but Nguyen Phu
mm-hmm,
Trong, who was the General Secretary of
mm-hmm.
the Central Committee of the Communist Party of Vietnam. And he argued that the doi moi, or the reform process that we are talking about, was based on overcoming dogmatic and simplistic ideas, as you were saying yourself,
Yeah.
and that this has led to a more complete and profound understanding of socialism and the transition to socialism. And among the simplistic ideas, he highlights, and this is a quote, homogenizing the end goal of socialism with the task currently at hand, one-sidedly stressing production relations and equal distribution without fully realizing the need to develop the productive forces in the transition period, not recognizing the existence of other economic sectors, putting the market economy in the same basket as capitalism, and viewing the rule of law state as the same as a bourgeois state, just to name a few.
Mm.
End quote. What do you make of this claim, which I think is quite fascinating, that the Communist Party of Vietnam has developed a kind of more advanced understanding of the transition to socialism and broken with some of the dogmatic views that are inherent in earlier iterations of the global socialist movement?
Uh, yes, this part of the post was also something that I liked a lot because it really highlights what the party has done in terms of self-criticisms and understand what we has not done good and why we need to change. And many of the points I just explained are already fit into that. For example, the first point is say harmonizing the end goals with the task at hand. So we know the end goal of socialism, right, is everybody according to their need, and highly advanced country is more or less about corporations as the main mode of ownership, common ownership as the main mode. That's the end goals. But the task at hand is developing the productive force. And we completely ignore this task and we just establish the end goals as the task. That's why it come into a lot of subsidized economy plannings. They try to set up this paradise where everybody get equal share of everything without anything. So basically, everybody equally poor. That's just that's just to make it simpler. So that's one thing. Then the second thing is one-sided thread of the relationship of production instead of looking them as a dialectic pair. So productive force and relationship of force are dialectic pair will always in contradiction with each other. And then, as I explained just now, they only focus on how we should set the relationship of production should be. Is it common ownership? Is it private ownership? And they don't even care about the productive force. So it's a wrong idea because we always need to look at both pair in a dialectic and see how they struggle and how they develop. One-sided looking at something and emphasize it as the tools is one of the big mistake of dogmatisms. And he also say, ignore the existence of the other mode of ownership, which is private, which is, uh, yeah, basically like for the direct investment and other things. So the reality is it was there. So if we ignore it and we kick it out and we make it illegal, it just becomes the black market. It will not transform in a debt into common ownership. Also, the foreign direct investment is from the capital world, and then all around us are capitalist countries. So how can we integrate while ignoring and even denying that this is something that are existing? So that's a big mistake. And the last one is I think equaling the rule of rules. How do they call it? The
In
rules
English, at
they
least, it's viewing the rule of law state as the same as a
rule of law
bourgeois
state.
state. Yeah.
Yeah. when they say rule of law state, meaning everything is set in the law, everything is set in the constitution with different structures. In the past, we don't pay much attention to that, and we use more or less decree from the governments, or even sometimes direct order from the parties for things to happen in the economic sphere or social sphere. It means that because they think that this kind of state with constitution and everything and rule is basically a capitalist state, which actually was not true. Also, another one is they think everything with market was capitalist. So at that time they think exactly that the Western left today in 1950 to 1956, because it was not so easy to understand what is really a market. It's a features of capitalism that has to develop the productive force. But it was not the capitalism itself, because the market exists before that as a kind of exchange where it not focused on generating profit. So normally we say it's commodities, money, commodity cycles. That is existing before the capitalist. The capitalist, it just use the market to make it into money into commodity and money plus, so they can gain the surplus values, and the market has to allocate a resource in the most efficient ways so that the productive force will be developed. So it's just a mechanism. So because we equal it, we make the market completely illegal because we don't want to build capitalism. But I think one of the big understanding that we have is we are able to understand more about socialist-oriented market, with totally kind of different from the free market economies that happen in the Western world. The main thing is in a socially-oriented market, there is multiple ownership, but then they have different roles, and they are owned guys by the parties. For example, in the party documentation, they already write the state-owned companies has the foundational roles, meaning they will take over the most important industry. For example, banking, resource extractions, telecommunications, military, food, and I think a few more. But it was clearly written what areas that the state-owned company will take over. Energy as well. And it was not written as they are the main driver for economic developments, because we know for sure that they will sometimes need to take loss and do a lot of things for the benefit of the whole country. One example is we have the EVN, which is electronics company for Vietnam, is state-owned company and take care of the whole grid. So they will develop the grid according to what the plan is. So whether it's you take the grid to the most remote islands, to the mountainous areas, or you develop multiple grids so that you can share between the north and the south, connect them all together, it was under political orders to do so. Of course, it might not be written in this way, but they are not allowed to refuse and do whatever they want. And then in the past, they invest here and there when they have the money, and they would ask to divest. So take back all of your money and just focus on your area, because you are doing also political jobs. You're not only here to make money. So it's kind of funny. A lot of people complain that state-owned company are not profitable and say that it's because we need to privatize them because the head are not good enough. But actually, there is only half true here. Yes, it's correct that the whole administration may not be the most efficient to extract the most profit out of it. But then also they do a lot of things that are not for profit. And even the price for electricity are kept at a level that are sufficiently low for developments. They are not even allowed to set the price. So that's one example. But then on the other hand, like consumer good, it was not so critical, and a lot of private company can join in, even FDI, and the party roles that they are the most important factor for for the economic growth. In the past, it's the FDIs, but now it is about the private company from Vietnam. Meaning we are changing our strategies from the more of export-led developments into more bringing the technologies, developing ourselves, making ourselves, and serving our internal market. Because we also know that more and more the FDI will move to somewhere else where they can use the labors, and of course they will not willing to transfer any technologies. So there is a new resolution from the party just a few months ago that's saying that focusing on technologies, and this is the key for future developments. And they really changed a lot of rules to allow it to happen. For example, in the past, the party will just give you a certain amount budget, do a research on certain topics, and then they don't know what to do with that afterward. So the researcher will not be able to make a profit out of it, not allowed to make a company. But then at the end, the whole patents will become nothing. There's nothing coming out of that. And a lot of rules and regulations saying how much you can spend here and there is no risk acceptance at all. So if you take the company, the government money, you must make something out with the orders, and it's not allowed that it's failed. But then we know, right, in research, especially high technology research, is very easily fail, and then maybe over 100 projects, you might have one or two that get something out, and then people want to build a company with that to get the money out of it and share with the government, but it was not allowed. And now it changed. Now it was allowed. They take it as a ventures, like the government will make a big venture, R&D venture of around 2 or 3% of GDP per year, and saying that now we don't control what you need to spend in every project. It's about the overall budget and what you make out of it. You can even, if you successfully commercialize it, then that even better, because we will have an internal company that able to produce high technologies, and they will allow us to pay over the market for, in order to extract the talent, the Vietnamese talent from many countries around the world. And it's really great kind of a shockwave. So now it's about how to implement it effectively. And I'm looking, I think in the next 5 to 10 years, a lot of technology, we will be able to handle it, because as you can see with the industry 4.0 is actually a next leap of the productive force. But then the Western world actually was not able to utilize it because they are too much into profit driven, which means nobody will spend the money to do the foundation things, like, if you want to build a data center to serve the whole countries, nobody will spend the money for that. But then for a country like China or Vietnam, because it's the socialist oriented, and we have the state-owned company, which we will ask them to do so, and on top of that, the private company will thrive because they don't have to build the foundational thing, and then they will do the research, and then we will be able to take over the new productive forces, and then we live in our development path, which has been seen in China, and what Vietnam aims to do in 2045. We are more or less in the high income levels, and from next year onward, 10% increase of GDP every year, and that's a very ambitious goal. But at the end of the day, we want to reach the same level as China, but of course, it's a smaller scale. That's what they are doing, and I think that's also what main different with the free market economy, when all to each their own, right? Everybody has their own motive, and they will even invest in the most degenerative things, like like selling prostitute and everything, as long as make money, or maybe Bitcoin and stuff like that. That doesn't really generate any real values.
Yeah, this is all fascinating. I really appreciated at the beginning of your comments how you highlighted, it strikes me as the kind of resolute dedication to a dialectical materialist analysis on the part of the
Yes.
Vietnamese Communist Party that is looking at the relationship between the kind of immediate tactics and the overall strategy or goal, and recognizing that you can't just make the strategy into a tactic and collapse things, but you actually have to
Yeah.
have steps that you take in order to transition towards that strategy. And the steps are confirmed through material reality. And when you see, of course,
Yes,
the
correct.
growth rates in Vietnam since the reform process have been quite phenomenal. Now, the next two questions that I had, I think you've already addressed to some extent. One was about the relationship between the state sector, the economy, and the private sector, which you were talking about a moment ago. And then the other
Mm.
was how Vietnam's project of national development relates to the broader capitalist world, which you've also been talking about with foreign direct investment and its efforts to move up the value chain. If there's anything you want to add about those two questions, feel free. Otherwise, I wanted to get a sense of your understanding of the governance structures within Vietnam and who's in
Mm.
control of the state. Some of
Okay.
Vietnam's leaders refer to the construction of a socialist democracy. What does this mean? How would you describe the overall modes of governance? But again, if you want to say anything more about the kind of relationship between the state sector and the private sector and the economy, or its model for national development within an international setting of global capitalism, feel free.
I think I had explained sufficiently on that topic, and I think it will be interesting as well on the topic of governance, because we say that the party want to set this and that and want to execute. How do they do that? And how do they ensure that the it doesn't get corrupted by the capitalism factors that are introduced with the market? So we are clear there is deficiency, there is drawbacks, there is risk, there is threat that will come with that, which I will go later. So how the Vietnamese government? I think the simplest way they say the party lead, the government manage, the people own. So that's the model. What does it mean? Meaning that parties will not manage the governments. They will not go into the daily government and execute orders saying, hey, we need to ban this, we need to ban that. No, it doesn't happen. What they do is instead they form a long-term strategies, long-term how we want to develop toward that. Which area will be the key area we will invest to? One example is I have in my hands the draft for the next conventions, and inside they say the three areas we want to focus is first infrastructures, secondly is the people's development, and the third is the change of the institutions, like the economic institution, the governments, the political institution, to make it more efficient, effective. So that's the three areas. So if and then the government manage, which means the government including the National Assembly, um, sorry, what else? The prime minister leading what? Sorry, I forget. The cabinet. Oh,
The cabinet, yeah.
yeah, for executions, and then also some kind of just and so on. The
Oh,
regular stuff.
like a legislative, executive, and
Legislative,
judicial
executive, and
branches.
judicial. So they are part of the governments.
Right.
So how do they execute? The party will come out with something like a resolution and saying in 5 years we want to develop technologies, for example. Then the National Assembly will meet and then change the law or issue some kind of resolution to allow it to happen. So this law is what everybody has to abide to, not the resolution of the party. The party are still following the law. But then since the party lead, whatever they write out will be the thing that will be made into the law. But of course, they only write a very high level strategies. Exactly how we do it, then the National Assembly will meet and make the laws. And then the executive branch will issue some kind of decrees, how to execute this law, how to make it matters. And then for the jurisdictions, they will find out how to supervise, control, and manage to ensure that whatever we want is to be run, that it will run properly. So these are very big contradictions that they understand from the USSR condition, actually. In the USSR, there is a point that the parties do the whole governance. I think it's before the Gorbachev times. Yeah. But then they look at things very one-sided. And when Gorbachev coming up and they think, oh, the parties must not manage everything. Then he just kick it out and then the party doesn't manage anything. But then at the same time, he also lose the leadership roles. So but the party become irrelevant. So we manage these contradictions by make sure that we made the same mistake in the past, but now we don't. The parties should only limit it to leading and the leadership roles, and should not trying to micromanage everything that the government happening that doing on a daily basis. But then at the same time, the government can manage, but it must follow the direction set out by the parties. And in fact, in our institutions, I think article number 4, so only Communist Party of Vietnam is the only leading political organization in Vietnam. There is no second party. There's no other political institution that allows to do this, and this is very important. And then the people, what does it mean? Most of the most important resources, like the lands and all the resources, are belong to the peoples, which means the governments are only given the right by the people to manage it. So meaning there is no real private ownership of the land to anybody. So you're given a certificate of land use. So you are allowed to use this land for this purpose that are already set out by the party. So they plan it. This area will be for agriculture, the area for the rice, the area for industrial zones, the area for residential. So you are not allowed to just build whatever you want on that land. And if you want to convert the use case, it goes through a lot of approval process. It's so not easy to do so, because this is the biggest corruption areas. If you can just pay and convert, let's say a rice into a residential, you will be able to sell a low value land at a much higher price, and that's how you make profit. But at the same time, you destroy the whole farming areas, and that is something that they need to manage. So nobody has the right to just say, this is my land, I do whatever I want. That doesn't exist in Vietnam.
And it's
So
the
that's
same
why,
with the natural
yeah.
resources.
Yes, the natural resources belong to everybody, so nobody allows to just go and extract to go out. The country will have plan and saying that this allows to be extract by how much per year and by which company, and the natural resource extraction is also managed by one state-owned company. It means that there is things that they don't even extract, and they will not allow people to extract. For example, rare earth, because Vietnam has the second biggest rare earth reserve in the world after China. I think many people didn't know that. Yeah, you always hear about China restrict the exports, and then now Australia. Actually, Vietnam has more than Australia, but they didn't allow it to be extracted because of environmental concern, and also we didn't have the real technologies to really produce them at the most efficient levels with the lowest impact on the environment. So they decide not to do it at all, and it's banned to export rare earth as a raw material outside. So you will go to jail if you do that. Even to the next country like China, a lot there is some guys that trying to smuggle some into China because China can refine them, and then when it was discovered, they go to jails. So that's how natural resources are controlled. Even oil and gas, on cap ore, even the sand. The sand, you use it to make road, right? So normally they take it from the bottom of the rivers, but then in the past, if you allow people to just take it, then the river path will change, and then it will destroy the bank on the side. And then now they will say that which area are allowed to be taken and which area was not. And they even try with the sand from the sea. So to try it out to see if it works. So we don't need to overexploit the sand of the rivers, because we need to develop, right? We still need the sand. So that's how the government manage things. But for sure, you can see there's a lot of loophole, there's a lot of place that people can sneak into and just do whatever they need. So it's important to reflect the realities. Meaning we see, okay, there's a problem here, and we have to make some laws, but then we have to ensure people follow the law, and that is the continuous progress.
That's fascinating. What are the social services like in Vietnam today? Socialist countries, generally pride themselves on using the value produced by workers to provide free or affordable education, healthcare, housing, access to full
Mm.
employment. Is this the case in Vietnam? And I'm also curious how that relates to kind of cultural development in contemporary Vietnam. Is there an effort to kind of tap into Vietnam's national culture and develop the culture by empowering the citizenry? And how does this development of national culture relate to the different ethnicities in the country? So, both regarding social
Mm.
services and cultural development, how do you see contemporary Vietnam functioning?
Um, the first one is about the welfare system and how it's taken care of. So what Vietnam is doing is when we say it's a solid market oriented, the key point here is we try to solve the contradiction between developments and social welfare. So because if we focus too much on economic growth and doesn't care about social welfare, then you will have a situation where you increase the rich and poor gap. But on the other hand, if you only focus on social welfare and spend a lot of money and then not economic growth, we will have not the resource to do so. So the way we do is we balance it whenever we develop, we will try to expand our coverage. One example, in the past we don't have medical insurance. Then after a while, when we more develop, we give it free for people under six and the elderly people more than 65. So with this medical insurance, you can go to any hospital and then everything will be paid for. But then in the past, it will be like 80% paid for, 20% co-paid, and you can only do at a certain hospital that belongs to your area because we have limited resources. But then they expand the coverage. So now with the more money coming in by taking proper tax and so on, they have allows the 100% payments for everybody. And then also links to all the hospital, meaning if I have that card and I manage to be in Hanoi enough time, I can go to any hospital in Hanoi and get treatment instead of going back to my place. In the past, if you like, if I go to another hospital, I will have only like 40%. Now I will have everything paid for. Unless you want to go top level of hospital, that is a different story. And the aims is until 2030, it's free medical coverage for everybody. That's what make officially by the party general secretaries, which means at the end of the day, it's spend the coverage to everybody and it should be paid by different mechanism. For example, for the people who are working in the company, it will be paid by the company. I mean, for people who are self-employed, then they will be subsidized. For students, right now they are subsidized around 50% for students after they grow up more than six, but then it increase over time. So in the past, I think it's 30% subsidized, now 50%. And it might be in the future, 100% free until 18. So that's how they want to extend the medical care to many people. But then how can they keep the price low? That's also linked with technologies because after many years of taking the technology in the pharmaceutical areas, we are now able to produce more sort of critical medicine ourselves, and we set the price as very low. So you only allowed to be paid 100% if you buy this kind of medicine and not the overpriced expensive one with the same ingredient from France, for example. One example is the vaccines that are made by Vietnam or Cuba. It could be like $10, and the one from France would be like 50 or $60 for the same things. But then, if you are rich and you want to pay, nobody forbid you to do so. But for the poor, they will not care about that as long as they are treated. And then that's how we are able to manage this whole situation. And yeah, and the more people choice, right? Actually, the fund is bigger, and it's make it much easier to pay for the one in need, and it really pays for everything. Cancer treatment, uh, hospitalized accident. I think only things that surgeries or dental treatment and stuff like that is normally out, but outside of that, I think nearly everything are covered by the government. So that's the medical, and I think in terms of housings, the fun fact is around 90% of Vietnamese own a house actually, and it's what nearly in every rural areas people will have their own house. The only biggest problem in the city because of the mechanical migration into the big center hub of economic developments, and no matter how much we try, it was not able to build house for everybody, and then it will be very expensive in the city. So it was clear that the solution is not to build more house in the city, even though we have social housing programs to make it easier for the lower income people to approach. But then the problem is, how do you say they are lower income? We have people who officially have no income but are very rich and want to join in and want to buy it and then sell at a higher price. And it's really happened. So policy is good, but then a lot of people can exploit the policies. So over the long term, that what they are really to try is to spread out the people, spread out the development economic centers, so people doesn't have to leave the place, or they can travel directly from their place to their workplace in a reasonable time, even though the distance may be long. Then you will reduce the demands for house in that areas. And then if you plan carefully, then you can also plan the area for residential next to the industrial zones in a totally remote areas. And it could be very cheap. But so the main question is how to bring company over there. And that's why they focus on infrastructures. They build road, they connect, they build road already. In this year, they will finish the highway from north to south. I think in 2 years, they will start the constructions of the railways, the high-speed railway from north to south as well. They are building a new international airport in the south to replace Tanzania. So it's going to be the biggest ever mega port projects in the north, in the south, connecting project to Laos, from the sea to Laos, or connecting project from the sea to Cambodia. And also now the effort of joining province, so they will join the province with has the sea and the province that are close to the border into one. So we had a massive province who are able to build all the connectivities that they need, and then with all these things, the end goals is people stay where they are and still can make end meet, because actually it much cheaper, the cost of living in lower in the rural area. If you had a house, you have to pay for rent, easier to commute every day by public transport. The only thing is how to bring the company there. So the company will go there. It's easier for them to transport the material in and out through the whole structure of port and landways, railways, and air, right? Because it's even more beneficial for them to stay outside and get a cheaper cost, because now people don't ask for the high salary to cover rents and everything. So that is the strategies. That's why they build so many things together. And if you look at China 20 years ago, that was exactly what China did. They bring the Xinjiang area, Tibet area, connecting them, connect every major city, every major areas. You make the rural area still stay rural but rich, and people doesn't need to go to the city anymore.
Right. Because then you can actually decrease the inequality between the rural and the urban, right, through the infrastructure projects.
And we are able to increase the housing coverage. Yeah. So that is the
and then
welfare.
what about education and culture in Vietnam?
Education. For education, it's the same strategies. I think in just last year, they give the free education fees for every levels. It was not like that before. And over time, they will expand it by, let's say, give more monies for the school to recruit, let's say, artists or people who will be able to provide a different kind of training to the people, so that they have a well-rounded development, not only knowledge, but also hobbies and something else. And that also the seed for the cultural developments. because we need to train them how to, if they are very good at singing, we need to train them how to sing to the proper things, then they can have early exposures to the cultural national values of Vietnam and so on. But then we need a resource for that, and then the way they do is the more, when they have the money, they will allocate more and more into that. That's why people is the second importance breakthrough they want to get. And in order to break through in people, we go through education and training. So more fund will be allocated to that areas. In terms of cultures, I think only recently they want to build some kind of national identity. So what a Vietnamese people values is, what is Vietnamese family value is, and it was written in the draft for the convention. I saw it yesterday. It was something like patriotics, independence, love for peace, freedoms, and that's the value we want to promote. And the ways to do that is recently there is a lot of events where the old songs of the revolutionary areas was changed in certain ways that it can mix in with the new generation, and then now it become a things like they listen more into this kind of music compared to US UK music in the past. And when they listen to that, then they start to learn about history, why there was a song like this. And then we just have a massive celebrations of our reunifications of 50-year reunification in just a few months ago. And I think Luna has a very nice video on that. But it was basically the first time that I have ever seen that people, especially the young people, sing along the red music. And now I can hear it nearly everywhere, just randomly. Even in TikTok. So they use it to insert into a lot of clips. But then it was changed slightly to fit into the modern theme, but then the content, the meaning stay the same. So it's similar to our reform, to find ways to make things more interesting and fit into the value with the new generation, but at the same time, it doesn't change its own values. And it also needs to take time because we want to build a cultural industry. And in order to do that, we also learn over time. So if you look at our states making 20 years ago and now, it's totally different because you need also to train people on how to, properly make the stage, how to compose music, how to fit everything together, how to make a big programs, how to generate some emotion in people when you have some program like this. Take time to learn, take time also equipment to be imported. And now actually in Vietnam, we are at a level that are nearly the same with many other countries like China or Japan in producing qualities. So it's about how to mix this kind of values, traditional value into that. I cannot show here, but I can give you a lot of examples later on in a cap link or something that Vietnamese just make a traditional folklore song into a big songs that when you listen to that immediately you feel patriotic about the countries. Or they take a song that are from a minor ethnic peoples with a distinct melody and then transform it into a song that everybody can jump into that, and it really happened in the middle of the there's a walkway street right with down low motorbike, right? So somebody just play it on the DJs, and the people just play along with that, and it was a song from the revolutionary area and from the ethnic peoples, and normally people will never listen to that in its original form. And that's how it was made. And of course, I just want to give one example on music, but I think there's some development over here, like how the young generation identify with the value of the countries, which I didn't see very clearly 10 years ago. I was always listen to rap music, we call it this way in the past, because I grew up from the family of my father is an army man, but I never really think that it can be this way. So, and the women are really quick to catch on that, and then in the national celebrations, instead of going with the old way of singing, they introduce some new factor, and then suddenly 100,000 of people gather just to watch that. So that is something that I think that I have a really high hope for the future.
Yeah, that's so important. I remember when we met in Vietnam, you had mentioned that a lot of the young people are interested in local Vietnamese culture and these connections to its revolutionary roots. And that's so important, as you highlighted, because a lot of the destabilization campaigns that are run against socialist countries try to target the youth and use cultural imperialism in order to get them on board with a kind of imperialist mindset via the cultural products of the empire. So those are very exciting developments. I just have a
Correct.
few final questions. One is, and you've touched on this a little bit already about Vietnam's relationship to the climate crisis. Is there anything more you'd like to add about how its developmental project relates to the need to mitigate and ideally reverse ecological destruction?
Yes, there is in the parties they say that we need to focus on green economy, circular economies, sustainable economies. So basically now when we do things that may have an impact on the environment, we will try to find ways to reduce the impact of and or even don't do it at all. So I already give an example in the extraction of raw materials. Some other example like like shrimp farming and rice farming. So shrimp farming I normally do after the rice farming season, and then it may have some impacts to the soils and other things. So now they have a new mode that they combine them together. So you farm the rice, and then the shrimp can develop underneath, and then there is technology to monitor the soils, monitor the water to ensure that it doesn't erode more than what we can take. And then the government, some more example is the government will observe the trend. Like for example, if this year El Ninos, then there will be less rain. So it's not a suitable times to do, let's say, 3 seasons of farming per year as regular. And they will say maybe you should do only 2, just to protect yourself and protect the soils. And then they will give our recommendations and people just for all the farmers so that they will not do so. And a lot of project on irrigations in the Mekong deltas, because Mekong delta will be the area heavily impacted by the climate change. If we don't do anything, then it will go under the sea. So we work with the Netherlands for a lot of project on the making the dams and how to control the flows of the water in and out. And of course the whole commitments to zero emissions in 2050. So that's why they changed everything to green energies. They don't develop any coal fires power plant anymore. Move everything into either renewables, or they are building a new nuclear power plant. Will be operational in 2030. It's already approved. So first one in Southeast Asia, because nuclear actually is very green and is really stable, because the regular power and wind, right? Even though it's green, but it's not so stable, so difficult to manage the grid. So that's why they still need the LNG fires thermal power plants. So that is still one part of our mix. So overall, in the futures, they move to nuclear and replace LNG with things like hydrogens. So you will not emit CO2. And in order to have hydrogen, of course, you need to have a lot of excess energies to split the seawater into hydrogen and oxygen. And that is the whole strategies. And in this manner, they also have the whole roadmap strategies for energy development until 2015 in order to reach the 0% emissions, which means that people are only allowed to build power plant how big they are, how much capacity they can generate according to this plan. So you cannot just build as many as you like in order to get the benefit. So yeah, that is in terms of energies, and I already talked about the green transformation of the mobile equipments
Yeah.
like car and what else? Yeah, we keep 42% of the forest coverage as a stable value, so they will regrow on the forest. and there's a lot of national park that there's nothing allows to be built within a park, and so on. Yeah, we was destroyed a lot in the past, and in our early developments, we also have to damage the environment much more. But I think now we take a different approach. The one liner they say we will not sacrifice the environments for purely economic development. That was written clearly. That's one liners. In this manner, I think we did a bit better than China's, because China, I think for the first 20, 30 years, they focus a lot on economic development, so a lot of environmental issues. And I think only after the last 10 years, then they start to do some kind of reversals on that. For Vietnam, we decide to do it together and not sacrifice our environment.
Yeah. It's important because it's another essential aspect of a socialist project, right? Where you don't put profit above people and the planet, but you put people and the planet above profit. Now, what are
Yeah.
Vietnam's foreign relations like, and more specifically, with the rising tensions between the leading imperialist power of the United States and what many people perceive as at least the most developed, socialist country, and also the leader in certain ways of the multipolar world, China. How does Vietnam situate itself in this kind of the rising global tensions between the US and China in particular?
mm, I think there's a lot of people have a wrong understanding that we are neutrals and trying to play both ways. But in reality, actually, our policy is we are independent. It means we have our own principle. So our principle is everything is based on peace first. We don't we have the four no's. Basically, we are saying we're not for any armed conflict. We're not joining any alliance. We are not allow anybody to put base on our soils. We're not using force or even threat to use force in any kind of international relationship. And the UN chapter is still the basic for whatever we do, which means that if China are for the peace and build cooperation and everything, then Vietnam will just show it. Even the US will, of course, will pressure us to make sure that we don't. But since we are independent, then our cooperation with China just blossomed over the last few years. It is really has no limitation on cooperations. Because we are, we are going to build also the railways connecting directly to China, and we're exporting more and more over there. The US want us to, don't import from China to make our good, but it was not logical because China is the biggest producer in the world. So of course, we also want to produce more and more over here, but it need time to build up. So we don't accept any threat from the US to just change our policies just to suit them. But then at the same time, our relationship with the US is basically money talk. We don't really have anything like what we have with China with the same, same socialist regime, same communist party, same direction. So between us and the US is it's just about we exporting to you. If you want us to import something from your side, we can also do so. And it's just about trying to find deals, basically. There is no more strategic trust and bigger things than that. So we are trying to dealing with different chain of policies from Trump's governance. And so far, I think it's worked well because one thing we do is we don't care about the performative PR. So for Vietnamese government, and their care is about the people, meaning it may look on the headline as we are accepting a defeat because we go and talk. But for us, it doesn't matter. If we go and talk and we delay the tariff and reduce the impacts to the one who produce and export and buying time to diversify our export market and also trying to find better deals, then it could. We don't, as far as we don't compromise any national security or do things like accepting some more things from the US, they will always ask for political change and stuff like that. So as far as it's not on the table, then it's fine. And at the same time, there is some, from both China and US, there is some threat that we need to take care of. I think from China is mainly because of the dispute on the sea, and from the US is a much bigger threat because at the end of the day, they doesn't want a communist country, so they always give fund to attempt for color revolution, and like you said, cultural imperialisms. They want to sit in, the most importantly, it's the individualisms into the younger generation of Vietnamese, which are actually, Ho Chi Minh say that is something that contradicts the socialists. So we need to develop our collectivisms, and it's go through multiple sphere, because it's happened, like, even in a Marvel movie, for example, you always want heroes, right? And that they use that as a kind of slowly seeding into what kind of values that you should respect, and that is the way it is. But Vietnamese movie are never about one person. There is some people leading, but it's about a group of person who are sacrificed in different ways. But then how can we fight back against that? And other things like, do you kick your kid out at 18? Do you throw your parents into nursing house? Which is very common in US because it's individualism, but also because the economy set out in ways that you cannot really take care of the rest. So in Vietnam, first of all, we need to emphasize the family values that has always been there for the past. So it's in our people, we never do this. We like to take care of parents, our kids, but at the same time, we need to create a welfare system that allow us to do so. And then by doing this, then we cultivate the collectivisms and other things like, every time there is a natural disaster, then people will just flock, all the resources will go there, and then we will encourage it. So sometimes I see in the US, there are funny things like there is a natural disaster and people are not even allowed to help because there is no rule saying that you can do so. Like you just give your food to people, and that's totally not understandable in Vietnam because we have the strong identity of collectivism from the past, and that is a good part we want to develop. That you just take care of the people that are more difficult than you, and everybody are teach in this way. So it's always a fight back and forth between different values. If you say about 10 years ago, maybe the individual a bit more, now it's a bit less, and maybe it's only dominate in the more in a group of people who are more living in the city and maybe more westernized, more, they think that they know best because they live in the US, or they think that they live in the US, and they try to promote this kind of value. So yeah,
Right.
so basically we want to see when we place not only US and China between multiple polars, right? We want to cooperate as much as we can on the areas that we see there is some synergies, and we must see what is the threat that coming to us and actively fighting back against it. So there's no real friend or enemies that how Vietnam see things. Everything is also a contradiction, a pair. So they are the partner and the enemy at the same time. It's just about which side are bigger and need to be developed at which time.
Interesting. Well, you've been really generous with your time. So I just have one final question, and that is, what are the risks that you see in Vietnam's socialist developmental project with the kind of reform process and engaging, quite openly with the broader capitalist world, as we've been talking about? There seem to be risks of anything from corruption to bureaucracy to opportunism, the individualism that we were just talking about, the degradation of the socialist project. What are the countermeasures that Vietnam has taken to avoid simply being engulfed within the capitalist system? And what's your sense of what the future holds for Vietnam? Do you see it intensifying its socialist project, or does it seriously risk devolving into a capitalist state?
I think the biggest risk that we can see is the degradations of the party itself. Because just now we know the party is the leaders of the countries. So we see the risk of party member, the self change and evolve and take the values that are not set down by the parties. That's the biggest risk, the party buildings. Because even though we say Marxism, Leninism, and Ho Chi Minh thought is our cornerstone of development, if people don't believe in that anymore, and somehow they manage to get into the top positions, then everything go haywire. The whole development strategy will change. They may even change the constitution, allows multiple party and stuff like that. So the first thing that they focus on is how to ensure that we build the right parties that only for the peoples and for the towards the national independence and socialism. And that's where you see a lot of campaign against corruptions. Because it's very easy to be corrupt in market environments. A lot of bribings and people like careerists like who just want to progress to the higher level and doesn't really care about the people and stuff like that. So that's why we take roughly 10 years to clean up a lot of liberal factions that really damaging the party reputations. And then now when we have a much stronger parties, then we start to reform. But this is a continuous progress. And ensuring we're selecting the right people for the party is the most important, or the most important task. And that is, so countermeasures, I think they build a lot of mechanism within the party to ensure that only the people, so it's built based on how you serve the people is a criteria for you to go up. So I think that's one thing. And much more control of power, checking and stuff like that. But because I'm not in the party, but I think that is the biggest countermeasures that we need to do. And I see, if you ask me now, I have a better hope for the futures compared to 10 years ago, because after a lot of corruptions, and recently I see even like they say there's no safe zones, meaning that if you have any kind of size of corruptions, doesn't matter who you are, you can be taken down. And it really happens, like people in the, even the politburos are taken down. It was never happened before. Even prime minister, presidents are taken down. And so I have high hope for that. And most of the leaders of the party right now are coming more from the military side or the public security side. So they know well about all the tactics of the imperialist country, and they are not tied to any, private big company or kind of people like that. Because in the past we have some leader of the governments who are trained by the US. Really, like they go to the US to learn liberal stuff, and then then they set out some. Of course, it's a group decisions, but they can influence that and really did some damaging things in the past. Yeah.
Great. Well, wonderful. This has been such a rich conversation. Thank you so much. Are there any final comments you'd like to share, or would you like to say anything about where people can follow your work and learn more about what you're doing in order to educate people about contemporary Vietnam?
I think the best advice that I can do is go and look for yourself, because we are talking about Marxism philosophy. It's always about the materials, the realities that you can see. Of course, you need some kind of theory underneath and understanding to able to synthesize and connect things together. But still important is go and look and understand and observe and have questions based on that and start to investigate. Don't just listen to anybody, even myself, whoever, about what Vietnam is doing, and it changes every day as well. So I know that it might not be so easy to just come here, but if Vietnam is really a topic that people want to really understand and want to represent us to the world, then the most important is you have to be here, observe, understand, and spend more time on it. That's really my final recommendation. Don't just spend time too much Tristosphere anywhere that you just read about. Um, and then if possible, if you cannot go, then find Vietnamese. Anybody is fine that can give you what they see, but then important is to must always have your own analysis of the thing, and need to understand Marxism philosophy. I train myself on that because it's really bring my mind up to a level that I was able to see what things are interacting and why a certain policy are that way. So don't look at things only on one side. That's yeah. That's what my
That's a wonderful point to
kind of what.
conclude on, right? Is that Marxist philosophy allows you a kind of systematic understanding and ability to make connections and see the totality and see the relations between all of the different elements.
Yes.
And I really appreciate the way that even in listening to you, a lot of the empirical data that you marshal, you have connected in a kind of holistic worldview that's really helpful. So you can always see things from multiple sides at the same time. So thank you so much. We'll wrap up here.
Yeah.